Lena stood at the edge of a new town, where the hills curved softly into the distance, and the wind carried the faint scent of pine and rain. She had come here to forget the life that had broken her, to bury the ache that came each time someone mentioned. The word mother, her past, felt like a shadow that followed her even under the brightest light, and no matter how far she ran, it stayed behind her, whispering reminders of what she had lost. She had once imagined a life filled with warmth and laughter, the sound of small feet running across wooden floors, the weight of a child's hand clutching hers. But that dream had vanished slowly, cruelly, as doctor after doctor gave her the same look of pity, the same quiet apology. It was as if her body had betrayed her, and her heart had never stopped mourning. She had been engaged once to a man named Caleb, who loved her deeply. Or so she thought, but love had turned fragile when hope disappeared. Their home became silent, a place filled with waiting, and wishing until the waiting became too heavy for him. One night he told her he couldn't do it anymore, that he needed a family of his own, and she had watched him walk away, taking with him the last piece of the life she thought she deserved. After that, she stopped dreaming. She packed up her things and told herself she would never again build a life around someone else's needs or expectations. The small town she moved to was quiet and kind in a way that unsettled her. The people greeted her with gentle smiles and curious eyes. They did not know her story, and she wanted to keep it that way. She found a tiny cottage near the edge of town, where the sound of the river filled the nights, and the silence felt like a friend she could trust. She painted again the way she used to when she was younger, before everything had gone wrong. She worked at a local cafe, serving coffee to strangers and pretending she was just another passerby. One afternoon, a woman named Clara came in and started talking to her about the elementary school needing a part-time art teacher. The previous teacher had gone on maternity leave, and they were desperate for someone who could connect with the children. Clara's tone was warm and persuasive, and before Lena could think of a reason to say no, she found herself standing in front of a classroom full of eager faces the next week. Their laughter filled the room, and for the first time in years, Lena felt something stirred deep within her. Something that scared her and healed her at the same time. Among those children were three who stood out, not because they were louder or brighter, but because of the way they looked at her, as if they recognized something in her eyes. Their names were Noah, Lily, and Ben's siblings, who carried the quiet ache of children who had lost something precious. They were kind and curious, and always together. She noticed that their father, Ethan, came to pick them up every day, his expression calm, his eyes tired, but gentle. He would smile politely at her as the children ran into his arms, and though she told herself not to notice, she did. There was something in the way Ethan listened when the kids spoke, something patient and steady, something that reminded her of all the good she had stopped believing in, and though she didn't know it yet, this small meeting, the polite smile, the shy wave from the children, would soon begin to change everything within her. It was the start of something she had never expected, a quiet story of healing beginning to unfold where her heartbreak had once lived. The weeks passed gently like the rhythm of a lullaby, and Lena found herself sinking into the warmth of the classroom as if it had been waiting for her all along. The children brought color back into her life, each brush stroke on their small canvases a reminder that creation was still possible even after loss. They painted skies that stretched forever and houses that leaned slightly to the side but felt like home. She laughed when they smeared paint on their faces, and her laughter surprised her because it sounded real, not borrowed, not forced. Noah, the eldest, was quiet and thoughtful, always sketching shapes that spoke more than words. Lily loved to talk. She told stories that made the whole class giggle, and Ben, the youngest, clung to his sister and watched Lena with wide, trusting eyes. Sometimes Lena caught herself wondering what it would feel like to come home to their chatter too, the messy joy that filled their drawings, but she would shake the thought away because she had promised herself she would not imagine things that could never belong to her. Ethan came by every afternoon just before the final bell. He stood by the fence with that same patient stillness, his eyes soft when his children ran to him. She often overheard snippets of their conversations, simple things about homework, dinner, and bedtime, but those small words carried warmth that reached her even from a distance. One day, Lily asked if Miss Lena could come watch their school play, and though she hesitated, Ethan nodded with an encouraging smile, saying the kids would love that if she could make it. At the play, the lights flickered, and the stage smelled faintly of old curtains and paper flowers. Ethan sat a few seats away from her, his children waving from the stage when they spotted her. She smiled and waved back, and when she glanced toward Ethan, she saw him watching her, not with the kind of gaze that demands, but with quiet appreciation afterward. The children ran to her arms, chattering all at once about their lines, their costumes, their triumphs. And Ethan stood nearby, saying softly, "Thank you for coming." It meant a lot to them. His voice carried gratitude that felt deeper than words. Days turned into evenings spent at the school or helping with small art projects. Ethan would sometimes stay to fix a broken easel or carry supplies to her car. Their conversations were light, but layered with something unspoken. He told her about his late wife, about the illness that had taken her too soon, and how he had been trying to keep life steady for the kids. Ever since Lena listened, her heart tightening at the tenderness in his voice. She saw how deeply he loved his children, how carefully he protected their happiness, and part of her admired that strength, even as another part feared it. The children grew more attached to her. They would bring her little drawings with notes that said things like, "Thank you, Miss Lena," or "You make art fun." Sometimes Lily slipped and called her mom before quickly correcting herself with a shy laugh. Lena smiled, but inside the word echoed in a place she thought had long gone quiet. She began to feel at home in moments she did not plan, for a paint smudge on her hand, a child's hug at the end of class, the sound of their laughter blending with her own. Ethan noticed, too. He saw how his children's world seemed brighter with her in it. And though he did not say much, his eyes held something gentle and certain. One evening when she stayed late to clean up, he walked her to her car. The air was cool and full of the scent of rain. He said, "I don't know what you've done, but my kids adore you." She replied, "They've done more for me than I have for them." And they stood there for a moment, caught between gratitude and something quietly blooming, something that neither of them dared name yet, but both could feel growing slowly, like spring returning after a long winter. The warmth that had begun to grow in Lena's life felt fragile, like a candle flickering against a soft wind. She tried to ignore the way her heart lifted when she saw Ethan and the children, but each day it became harder to pretend that her connection to them was just work. The laughter, the stories, the shared silences had woven themselves into her routine until she could no longer imagine the days without them. Yet beneath all the joy, a quiet fear started to stir again, that old familiar ache, whispering that this happiness was not meant for her. One Saturday, Ethan invited her to join them for a picnic by the river. The children ran through the grass, chasing butterflies, their laughter ringing through the air. Lena sat beneath a tree helping Ben untangle his kite while Ethan spread out the food. The sunlight caught in his hair, and for a moment she saw something peaceful in him, something that felt like belonging. He handed her a sandwich, and their fingers brushed lightly. It was a small touch, but it sent a wave through her that she couldn't quite contain. She looked away, her heart tightening with the realization that she was falling into a life she had promised never to hope for again. After that day, things felt different. Ethan began to linger a little longer when he came to pick up the kids. His eyes softer, his words warmer one afternoon. As the children gathered their things, he stayed behind and asked if she would like to have dinner sometime. Just the two of them. She hesitated the answer, sitting heavy in her chest. She wanted to say yes, but her fear rose like a tide. She said maybe with a half smile, and he nodded as if he understood, though the quiet between them said otherwise. That night she couldn't sleep, her thoughts looping through all the memories she had tried to bury Caleb's voice echoing in her mind, telling her he needed someone who could give him a family. She still remembered how those words had carved her apart. She had believed him. She had believed she wasn't enough. She told herself that Ethan and his children deserved someone whole, someone who could give them everything they needed, not a woman who carried so much emptiness inside her. A few days later, she found herself distant. Distracted in class, the children noticed, and Lily finally asked if she was sad. Lena smiled and said no, but her voice trembled after class. Ethan came to see her. He said softly, "You've been quiet lately. Is everything all right?" And she felt the tears. Burning at the back of her eyes, she turned away and said, "I can't do this." He looked at her confused, and she added, "I can't be a mother. I can't be what they need, what you need." Her words came out broken, but certain. Ethan stood still for a moment, and then said, "You don't have to be anyone but yourself." But she shook her head. She couldn't believe that she could ever be enough. That evening, she packed her things from the classroom, leaving behind the small drawings the children had given, her each one filled with color and joy that felt like a part of her heart. She placed them in a box and whispered a quiet goodbye. She told herself it was better this way, that leaving now would save them from disappointment later as she drove away. The town lights blurred through her tears. The road stretching endlessly ahead, she told herself she was protecting them, but deep down she knew she was only running from the love she didn't think she deserved. The days after Lena left felt like walking through an empty house where every sound echoed too loudly. The cottage that once felt peaceful now pressed against her. With silence, she tried to fill the hours with painting, but every color she touched turned dull. Her art had always carried her through pain. But now even the canvas seemed to resist her. The faces of the children haunted her dreams. Noah's quiet smile, Lily's endless stories, Ben's tiny hand tugging at hers, and the way Ethan had looked at her that last day. Calm, steady, but full of something she could not bear to face. She told herself she had done the right thing, that they would move on without her. But the ache only deepened. In the town, she was gone from the classroom, sat still, the paint jars half empty, the drawings fading slightly on the walls. Ethan tried to keep the days normal for the children, but their eyes carried questions. They didn't speak. Noah stopped sketching. Lily grew quieter, and Ben asked every night if Miss Lena was coming back. Ethan answered gently each time, saying, "Maybe someday." Though inside he wasn't sure if that was true. He missed her too, but he knew pushing her would only drive her further away. One afternoon, weeks later, Lena received a letter. It was from Lily. Written in careful, uneven letters, she said that the class wasn't the same without her, that the art room missed her, and that Ben had drawn a picture of their family with her in it. The words pierced through the walls Lena had built. She sat there, staring at the paper until the tears came. Not the kind that fell quietly, but the kind that tore through years of restraint. She realized then that what she feared most wasn't being unable to give love, but being unable to accept that she already had. The next morning she went for a walk by the river, the same one where they had picnicked months ago. The air was cold and sharp, the water whispering softly against the stones. She watched it flow and thought about how it never stopped. Even when it bent around obstacles, it just kept moving. Maybe that was what she needed to do too. Not erase the past, but move with it, not against it. She returned home and looked through the box of drawings she had packed away. One caught her eye. It was a picture Lily had drawn of the four of them standing together under a bright sun. At the bottom were the words, "Our art family," and below that 3 small hearts. Later that evening, her phone rang. It was Clara, the woman who had first offered her the teaching job. Her voice trembled as she said there had been an accident on the school trip. One of the children, Ben, had fallen and been taken to the hospital before she could think Lena was already out the door. The drive felt endless, her mind spinning. With every memory, every laugh, every promise she never made when she reached the hospital. Ethan was in the waiting room, his hands clasped tightly together, his face pale. When he saw her, he didn't say anything. He just looked at her as if he had been waiting the whole time for her to come back. Ben was all right, just a minor injury, but the fear in Ethan's eyes told her how much he had been holding inside. She sat beside him, the room quiet. Except for the hum of machines, he whispered. I didn't know if you'd come, and she said I didn't either, but I couldn't stay away anymore. He looked at her with a kind of relief that felt like forgiveness. She realized then that she hadn't ruined anything. She had only been too afraid to believe that she was already part of something real. When Ben woke up and smiled at her, calling out her name, she reached for his hand and everything inside her settled. She finally understood that love wasn't about perfection or blood or promises. It was about showing up when it mattered, about being there when someone called your name, even if you were scared, even if you thought you couldn't be enough. Morning light spilled softly through the hospital windows. The world outside washed clean by rain. Lena sat beside Ben's bed, her hand resting gently on his small fingers. He was awake now, smiling through the sleepiness, his other hand clutching. The worn, stuffed bear she had brought him years of emptiness seemed to fall away in that quiet moment. Ethan stood by the doorway, watching her, not saying a word. The air between them filled with something fragile and whole. She turned toward him, her eyes rimmed red from sleeplessness and tears. But when she met his gaze, she felt steady for the first time in a long time. When Ben was cleared to go home, Ethan invited her to come with them. She hesitated only for a moment before nodding. The drive back was calm. The children's chatter filling the car, Lily leaned forward to show her a new bracelet she had made. Noah pointed out clouds shaped like animals, and Ben drifted in and out of sleep, his head resting on her shoulder when they reached the house. The familiar warmth wrapped around her, the walls lined with drawings, laughter spilling from every corner. It felt like walking into a memory she hadn't dared to dream of. As evening settled, the children gathered in the living room for a movie. Ethan went to the kitchen and came back with 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her and sat beside her. Their shoulders brushed, and for a while they just listened to the children giggling at the screen. She whispered, "They deserve the best." And he looked at her for a long time before saying, "They already have it." She shook her head, smiling faintly. "You don't understand. I can't be their mother. I don't know how. I don't know if I can." And he smiled that quiet, patient smile that always seemed to reach deeper than words. He said softly, "You already are to 3 who call you Mama." She froze, the words echoing through her like sunlight breaking through fog. He didn't say it as comfort or persuasion, but as truth. And the first time she let herself feel it, really feel it. Every laugh, every tear, every small moment she had shared with them had already written her place in their hearts. She wasn't trying to replace anyone. She was simply there, loving them in her own quiet way. Tears welled in her eyes as the children turned toward her. Ben climbed into her lap, resting his head against her chest. Lily leaned close, and Noah smiled in that quiet, knowing way of his. Ethan's arm brushed against hers, and she leaned into the warmth of it. She didn't speak because words felt too small for what her heart was trying to say, but in that silence, she understood that motherhood wasn't a title. It was presence. It was love woven through ordinary moments. It was showing up even when it hurt. Later, as the children drifted off to sleep, Lena helped tuck them in. Lily mumbled, "Good night, Mama," before her eyes closed. Lena stood still, her hand trembling as she brushed the hair from Lily's forehead. The word didn't sting this time. It felt like home. When she stepped out of the room, Ethan was waiting in the hallway. She looked at him, the soft lamplight catching the warmth in his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." He shook his head and said, "No thank you." For coming back outside, the rain had stopped, the sky stretching wide and endless above them. Lena took a deep breath, the scent of earth and new beginnings filling her chest. She didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time she didn't need to. She had found something she thought she'd lost forever. Not perfection, not certainty, but love. Real and quiet and whole. As she turned to go back inside, she heard Ben's sleepy voice call from the room, "Night, Mama," and she smiled, her heart full of the simple truth she had finally accepted she already was.